Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. Ever since Rollock was added into the game and Sigma 2, Blizzard have been fairly quiet on the balance of the game. Of course, a lot of stuff has happened in that time. Double barriers become incredibly meta to the point where it's a bit obnoxious. People really aren't enjoying it. So they want some changes reverted, some buffs for certain heroes, and some other heroes nerfed alongside. Yesterday, Blizzard broke their silence talking about the balance of the game and how they intend to sort of go through some of the changes at the moment, vicariously answer some of the questions that we have about balance changes that may or may not be coming. I felt that now was a really good time to bring up the fact that we've been working with Blizzard on some Overwatch League content, and we recently had the playoffs. This weekend having some really good games. They will finish this weekend preparing for the grand final, which will happen at the end of this month. So just be sure not to miss it. You can find the link in the description below. We will be highlighting some of the games because heroes like Ashe were picked and did quite well. And I certainly want to talk about Moira a bit more later this week. This comes from Joshua No, who is one of the senior developers on Overwatch, is a GM player, and I think is focused a lot on the balance of the game as a whole. And an important thing that he mentions about the meta, which I did also want to talk about. They first say that they've barely entered into 222 roll queue, and they also released a new hero at the same time being Sigma. It's important to collect statistics data as well as feedback to make informed decisions. Now, ever since Rollock came in and Goats was made unplayable, literally, a lot of people have sort of come forward with previous nerfs and buffs in the past and basically said to Blizzard, now that Goats is no longer a thing, how about we revert these changes? Changes include the buffs to Orisa, the damage that she does and how often she can put down a shield, but also the following that came in at the end of February. Junkrat's damage was increased, Symmetra's damage was increased, and Zenyatta and Lucio were nerfed. For Lucio, the speed song effect was lowered 20% passively, and also for Amp It Up it was reduced from 70% to 50%. His overall passive movement from wall riding was increased to 40%, that kind of made up for it, individually at least for Lucio, but how he worked with his team was reduced. Zenyatta, the Orb of Discord effect was reduced to 25%, but his damage was increased with his primary fire. There was a reason to this, and Sideshow actually highlighted it way back when.
If you look, there's kind of a theme that runs through a lot of these. It's abilities that affect the team as a whole have been reduced, and abilities that affect the heroes individually have been increased. So like speed that affects the rest of your team has been decreased, but Lucio's still wall ride exactly the same speed because they increased that. Zenyatta's Discord for the team has been decreased, but Zenyatta still does the same amount of damage himself to discorded targets. So I love the way that the developers have taken it and gone, okay, we're not going to make it any worse for you guys in Ranked who don't have the same amount of teamwork. If you're a Zen or a Lucio in Ranked, you probably won't notice that much difference. But if you're playing at the top level, or you're playing, you know, in GM or something like that, where, okay, the meta is pretty oppressive at the moment and it's very much about how you play as a team and you can't shine that much individually, well, here we go. Here's some options for nerfing it.
We'll come back to why exactly I used that Sideshow clip. These were just all changes in order to try and tackle Goats. But like I said, now that this is no longer a thing, are we likely to see buffs to Lucio, to Zenyatta, nerfs to Symmetra and to Reaper? And the general answer is no. Reverting all the balance changes over the last year is unlikely to happen. Any hero change could potentially affect the meta to some degree, but not all changes are directly targeted at the current meta, if that makes sense. He also mentioned that some of the changes weren't directly targeting Goats and being able to destroy it, such as the Soldier, McCree and Junkrat buffs. But here's the Sideshow bit that I was talking about. The goal of the changes that actually were aimed at Goats was not to kill it entirely, but to weaken it enough without destroying the individual heroes. It's exactly the same as what Sideshow said. He also goes on to say that other new comps could arise to compete with it. Though it took a long time, with the result of Stage 3, I consider that at least somewhat successful. Even if solutions are hypothetically available, any meta is ultimately dictated by the players. This is a really important statement that Blizzard have made, and it reminded me of something that Evil Toaster said a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about how Reinhardt is actually kind of good against double barriers because you could just run through them, but it's the last sentence in this tweet that I think is really important to know. People are so hung up on what they believe the meta is that even people trying to explore options to counter it are reportable to them. I get why people don't like double barrier, but I feel that over time people are starting to work out how best to counter it. It's not like Goats in the sense that it's unbreakable. We can only just play it and hope that Blizzard nerf it. So when Blizzard say that the meta is dictated by the players, I feel like this is one of those areas where the balance of the game statistically from Blizzard's point of view is actually not too bad. It's just that we, the player base, believe that the game is in a lot worse state than it is. This is amplified by the fact that Blizzard have added in a new tank hero that people wanted, and also added in role queue, which is one of the best decisions that they've done ever since the game came out. But the game still feels the same. I wouldn't necessarily say that it feels better or worse, it still just feels like Overwatch. Maybe people were expecting role queue to change the game in such a way that it felt entirely different, but it doesn't stop you from getting throwers or just having bad games in general, that people feel that this iteration of Overwatch, this meta that we're in, is the worst ever. But in fact, it's the same. People were just expecting more, so it's more of a sense of disappointment in the air than sheer frustration at the meta. I hope all of that makes sense. I just felt like it was really important to talk about that in particular. I'll finish off the rest of the statement and then we can talk a bit more about it. Aside from meta considerations, it's important to prioritize individual hero balance, which is why we're tuning Zarya and Symmetra damage output. This is just a nice explanation from Blizzard, basically saying why they are nerfing and buffing and changing Symmetra and Zarya, even though they don't really have much to do with the meta, or at least Zarya doesn't, to be fair. But I felt that this was interesting coming out of Blizzard, sort of out of the blue. Like, they could have responded a lot earlier in these areas, but I'm glad that they said something. There's a general sense of the meta, the game isn't in as bad of a state as you think it is, kind of reminding us that the community, the meta as a whole, is dictated by us, the player base, as opposed to Blizzard themselves. I wish they kind of went into sort of stats a bit more, saying, hey, it's not bad, like these are the pick rates for Arisa and Sigma as main tanks, here's their win rate, things aren't as bad as they seem. But I am a little bit disappointed that they're not going to revert some of the changes in the past, or at least saying that it's unlikely to happen. In short, a lot of people are saying to revert the changes to Lucio with the speed boost, to try and bring back Dive. That would be the ideal way. Making his aura bigger, increasing the speed boost, might make those dive tanks a bit more viable, and that composition as a whole a lot better against a heavy bunker comp at the moment. But looking at the Overwatch League, Lucio Moira is one of the most popular support duos in a composition that plays very similar to how GOATs used to. So making Lucio strong in this fashion might make that a lot more prominent, the whole Reaper Mei composition that people have been running. But like I said, over time, teams are starting to change from Mei and Reaper to Reaper and Doomfist, to Pharah Doomfist, to McCree Reaper. There's a lot more DPS stuff going on at the moment. The supports are all being picked, DPS there's a good amount of options, it's just the tanks, Arisa Sigma, that seems a bit too strong, that I do think the Blizzard are going to nerf sometime soon on the PTR. At least here's to hoping. But I hope you enjoyed this video, nice breakdown from Blizzard on what's going on at the moment, but thanks for watching, take care, we'll see you next time.